Hanging from the ceiling at the Evergreen Air and Space Museum is a wooden mock-up of a North American X-15 rocket plane. Only 3 of these planes were built in 1959, and one of them is the world's fastest crewed airplane. The X-15 launches from a huge B-52 mothership. It gets hauled up to 50,000 feet and then drops clear and fires its engines. The 3 aircraft built flew a total of 199 flights from 1959 to 1968. Most of the flights had either a high altitude flight profile or a lower, flatter flight profile, which resulted in really high speeds. The high altitude flights developed and used small rocket thrusters that became the reaction control systems for the space shuttle and other crewed rocket aircraft. Oh, something really cool you can see from this angle. If you see below, there is a vertical stabilizer below the back there, and you see how it's got a wedge shape to it? An interesting aerodynamic thing happened when they did that. The aircraft thinks it has a rudder, which is sticking out the airplane about 60 feet behind it by doing that. It creates so much drag in that one spot that the airplane thinks it's got a huge rudder on it. And they needed it because this airplane went 4,500 miles per hour. They made it go Mach 6.7. Pete Knight. That's really interesting. These high altitude flights lasted for 80 seconds. They reached about 3,800 miles per hour, and the highest one made it to 354,000 feet. So that guy became an astronaut. Quite a few people that flew this became astronauts. The pilots that flew this airplane became astronauts. They actually wrecked one of these planes when they had to land it with full fuel, and it didn't like that, and it kind of broke in half. So that gave them an opportunity for some redesign. They cut the fuselage in half and lengthened it 28 inches so they can make the fuel tank bigger. Basically, this thing is just one giant fuel tank. Well, 2 giant fuel tanks. They then added 2 ridiculous drop fuel tanks under the wings, and I have some pictures of that. The rocket plane used these tanks first, and then they dropped away. This new creation was named the X-15A2, and she now had fuel for 2.5 minutes of powered flight. Without the drop tanks and without the fuselage extension, fuel burn was only 80 seconds. Most of these flights were only 10 minutes long. But on the 3rd of October 1962, Pete Knight leveled her off at 100,000 feet and let her rip. She hit 4,520 miles per hour somewhere between Salt Lake City and Edwards Air Force Base. That airplane is currently at the National Museum of the US Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. These super fast flights developed the throttleable and restartable engine that was what the Apollo lunar lander landed on the moon. It was the throttle controls of this engine right here. They were figuring it all out. This engine company also went on to develop the solid rocket boosters that were used on the space shuttle. Only 12 pilots flew the X-15, and one of them was Neil Armstrong. Neil went on to be the first person that landed on the moon. The airplane on the ceiling here is a wooden mock-up that was used for wind tunnel tests while the 3 real airplanes were being built. There is another wooden mock-up at the Pima Museum in Tucson. The final surviving X-15 is at the Smithonium Institution in Washington, D.C. Tragically, the 3rd aircraft was lost in a flight test accident. This is the fastest crewed airplane ever. It's just a missile. Research.
And on a side note, the 2 B-52 aircraft that did all the mothership for this program and a whole bunch of other programs they were doing at the time and after, those 2 aircraft, one of them, number 3, is at Pima, and number 8, it sits all by itself outside the gate at Edwards Air Force Base. And Chris and I went and visited it about a year ago, and we drove onto the base. It was the weirdest thing. They got all these signs saying you can't do photography, you're total restricted access. You drive miles onto the base to get to the north gate, and then there's a little parking lot in front of